Now, there's been some small but notable activity in the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours. 3 ships, including one co-owned by Japan, the other by a French company, able to cross safely, according to satellite tracking picked up on the seaway, according to marine traffic data. A container ship belonging to the French shipping group CMA CGM, a rare transit by a major European shipping group since March the 1st. Prior to that, reported 3 Greek vessels have been able to cross. At least 2,000 more ships remain stranded. There's more than 20,000 ships' crew still on board, some of them reportedly rationing. Now, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard continuing to threaten, quote, hostile countries. And it comes as the French president is in South Korea talking about finding a way to open the strait, days after France objected to UN resolution drafted by the Gulf states and the US to give legal right to force of opening the strait by, quote, any means necessary. Are the two linked? Let's bring in Christian Bueger, the Professor of International Relations at the University of Copenhagen and author of the book Understanding Maritime Security. Great to talk to you tonight, Professor. Let's begin on your understanding of this French vessel apparently being able to leave. What's your reading of that?
So it seems that diplomacy is starting to work. More and more ships are now passing through the strait, and that is in many ways good news. But obviously, it's still far from normal. Usually 140 ships go through the strait, but I think these are relatively positive signals that Iran is open for negotiations, and I'm optimistic that we are finding solutions. But unfortunately, none of this is going fast enough, and the damage to the global economy obviously continues.
This is interesting. Let me put this kind of context framing to you and see which you think is relevant right now. Wednesday, Bahrain drafts a UN resolution that, if agreed, legally authorises all members of the UN to take military action, force any means necessary to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. It didn't go through. It was changed because Russia, strategic ally, China, most important trade partner to Iran, were against it. France too. The wording from France is that they are concerned about proportionality under international law, avoiding another escalation. President Macron said as much in South Korea. And so that's changed. The vote goes ahead tomorrow. Now it's defensive means only. Is there a link? Are you saying that this diplomacy is being registered?
So diplomacy here works on several levels. One is the direct negotiation with Iran over the passage of individual ships, and that has been going on over the last weeks. And it was also India, Indonesia, and other countries got their ships through. So this is one level of diplomacy. Another very important level are the discussions on the UN Secretary General's fertilizer initiative that apparently has made some progress, but not as fast as was initially expected. And here the idea is to let ships through that carry fertilizer or humanitarian aid. And Oman has been proposed there as the site where the UN could do verification of vessels and so on. The other layer is the UN Security Council, and Bahrain has put forward an initial Security Council resolution a couple of weeks back, 2817, and that was passed in a historic situation because more than 135 states supported the resolution. The question now is, what is the next step in the UN Security Council? And in many ways, the idea that the strait could be opened by a military force is misleading. And in that sense, I can understand the resistance towards the idea that the resolution should operate under Chapter 7 and sanction the use of force. In military terms, we cannot go back to normal. Escorting ships through the straits is extremely difficult. And instead, without a ceasefire, we cannot go to the next stage of developing a regime for the strait where we can gradually have more and more ships passing through. So I do not expect to see a UN Security Council resolution being adopted by consensus that actually includes the use of force. But tomorrow we're most likely going to know more.
It's very interesting, Professor. So you're saying if there is an agreement at the Security Council, and again the language has changed from, quote, as you talked about, Charter 7 of the UN Charter, which is any means necessary, again, France was concerned about preemptive strikes, to defensive means, which we don't know. But that would essentially be anything that is targeting the shipping, it could be escorted, and the right to fire back. Are you saying that if that goes ahead, you also don't think that is the most conducive way to actually getting this strait running as it was before?
Absolutely. It's really, really difficult to offer the level of protection that the shipping industry actually would require. And here we are looking at the broad range of weapons that Iran de facto has. It is very difficult to offer escort to a large number of ships, and even then, the risk that a ship gets hit is extremely high. And given the amount of ships that we are talking about, this is not really a viable option. And there's also the risk that Iran will interpret more and more countries as being de facto war parties, despite a UN Security Council resolution. This is also not what the shipping industry in the end is interested in. To open up the strait, we require a broader process. And very important, we should also start looking ahead in terms of what kind of setup do we need once the hostilities end. And there we should have all the plans ready in the drawer. And I know that this is already part of the negotiations in terms of how this can look like in the midterm, but also in the long-term future.
Tell me, Christian, what else is moving and why right now? We've talked about, you mentioned something that the Iranians wanting to do a monitoring system with Oman. There's talk of money essentially paid, 2 million or so, 1.5 million per vessel. Help us understand who's paying what to move.
So one important initiative is also led by the UK and France in terms of assembling the coalition that can actually establish a sort of mechanism once we have a ceasefire, once hostilities are over. And we're now at over 40 nations that want to chip into that. The German Chancellor has spoken about a sort of contact group being established for that. Others speak about a Strait of Hormuz commission. And such a mechanism has been used in the past in counter-piracy situations, for instance. And it's an effective means to arrange a naval coalition, multilateral forces, but also have a strong link to the shipping industry, the insurance industry, and so on. Iran currently charging for the passage is quite obviously not a sustainable solution in the long run. So, but at the same time, it's also signals that Iran is actually open to certain kinds of negotiations, and these will provide the seeds for the future arrangements that we need once a ceasefire is there, which hopefully is soon.
A brief thought, because there's lots of information going around about the thousands of ship's crew that are still in the Strait of Hormuz, are around there and can't leave. Do you have any understanding of the situation they're facing for those still stranded?
Yeah, this has to be one of the priorities, to get the seafarers out of there. And I do hope that over the next days, we're going to see more and more ships actually passing through, so that the situation the tension will be released a little bit. But let's not forget, even if Iran would declare tomorrow that the strait is open, this will have long-term impacts, because shipping is a fragile, globally interconnected system, and going back to normal will take quite some time, and that unfortunately also means tricky situations for the seafarers. Fortunately, at least the International Maritime Organization is really prioritizing the cause of the seafarers, and that is good to know. Quite obviously, the International Maritime Organization is relatively limited in terms of what it can do with its mandate.
Professor, really good to talk to you tonight. Thank you for your time. Professor Christian Bueger, the International Relations Professor at the University of Copenhagen. As I said, author of the book 2, Understanding Maritime Security. We did that tonight a lot better. Thank you for your time.